Ahoy, you salty sailors. Time to raise anchor and set sail for your best scrawny life. Arr.
So we embark on our expedition bearing in mind what we've said previously about the Dunning-Kruger curve, that confidence is highest when knowledge is still relatively low. And even more important is to understand confirmation bias, the tendency that all people have to see what they expect to see. We see the world through the filter of our minds. It does not matter how smart you are. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me at all if highly intelligent people with more active brains were more likely to fall into this trap. But either way, you always have exactly what you need to fool yourself. The person who doesn't have time to carefully listen or observe, and who's in a big hurry to show everyone else that they already know what's going on, won't survive long in amateur mycology. Alright, so here are some mushrooms. They've got the thin, true gills in rusty brown, probably a Cortinarius species, probably fairly toxic. Once again, we've got, note that orange on the base of the stem and almost purple at the top of the stem. And again, the true gills. Here's another gilled mushroom with the brittle, fragile nature of the Russula genus. And over here, we finally have some chanterelles with the false gills, the shallow ridges underneath the cap, and that rather trumpet shape morphology. And we have some more over there, and over there, a little quarter circle surrounding a large oak tree up the edge of the lake. Now, let's have a closer look at the underside of the chanterelle for identification purposes. You'll see there those shallow false gills. They are not the thin true gills. And also that trumpet or vase-like shape. Now that can be somewhat deceptive, because as they age, all of the mushrooms sort of wind up looking the same. Chanterelles come out of the ground looking like this, sort of like a trumpet or a vase. And as they age, the margins of the cap fully unroll and begin to lift. That's what stage this mushroom is in. Now, of course, we're talking about a cross-section view of the mushrooms. And at maturity, the margins of the cap are lifted up like this. Now, your regular mushrooms, gilled mushrooms, begin with an umbrella type of shape. The gills are underneath the cap like that. And then, of course, as they age, the margin of the cap lifts with the gills underneath like this. And finally, at maturity, they begin to take a sort of a Y shape in cross-section. So at maturity, they look very similar. So shape cannot be your only identification criteria. Let's look at what is meant by those false gills. Here you'll see very shallow ridges composing the hymeneum, the undersurface of the mushroom cap. Very shallow, sometimes with these little cross sections and so forth. That is the false gills of the chanterelle. Now here is a mushroom with true gills. You'll notice that they're thin and deep. Here's another mushroom with true gills. Again, paper thin and quite deep set. There's quite a distance between the edge of the gill and the where it attaches to the cap, where here there's a very shallow ridge is what you're looking at in the chanterelles. That's a key identifying feature for all Chanterelles, is the shallow false gills. So we'll go ahead and pick a few more. Now these are Chanterelles phasmatis, the ghost chanterelles, which have the white stem underneath a yellow cap. And of course, you don't want to use this video as your only reference material for identification. these we can't cover all of the factors, the criteria, and so forth. Of course, they emerge from the ground around oak trees and so forth, but so do all of their poisonous lookalikes. The key is just don't eat anything that you have doubts about. If you cannot, with 100% confidence, identify the mushroom to the species, then you don't have any business putting it in your mouth. So here are 3 poisonous lookalikes, and there are others. There are many other species that could potentially be confused with chanterelles. But look up each of these 3 species on iNaturalist.org, and where you can view hundreds of photographs of these mushrooms at different stages of their growth, and become familiar with the entire life cycle of each one of these poisonous lookalikes. And you can cross-reference the similar species tab and read the article under the About tab and what notes people have left along with their observations. You know, the jack-o'-lantern mushrooms smell really nice. They smell like they would be edible. In fact, they smell like they would be quite tasty, sort of like chocolate chip cookies in the oven almost. But turns out quite poisonous. And furthermore, we're dealing here with the Chanterelles phasmatis, but you may have different chanterelles in your area. We have 3 main species here in Iowa. You'll want to become familiar with all 3 of those and what do they look like at different stages of their growth. So broad knowledge and detailed knowledge, it's all important. And of course, anytime that you're trying any mushroom, even one that's recognized as edible for the first time, you want to start small, just a small piece of 1 cap, cooked well. Wait overnight. Do you have any issues, any allergic reaction, and so forth? Then the next day, consume a little bit more. Start small with anything that you're trying for the first time. And here I've wandered into a patch of Boletus variopes. These are bolete mushrooms, so they have the pore surface, or a surface of very small holes underneath the cap, forming the hymeneum rather than either gills or false gills or denticles. So for comparison, let's look at another gilled mushroom, and you'll see that again those thin gills that spread out radially from the stem, as opposed to the pore surface, a surface of tiny holes underneath the cap of the bolete mushrooms. And in this photo you can see easily the white netting, that reticulation pattern that covers the stem. That is also an identification feature for Boletus variopes, as well as the fact that they do not stain blue or any other color when they are cut, and they do not have bright red or yellow coloration on the stem or the cap or the pore surface anywhere. Now there is a second fungus at work here, and that is Hypomyces chrysospermus, a type of mold that attacks bolete mushrooms. And you can see this cap is beginning to show signs of infection. And here we see a small group where some of the caps are clearly infected, while others do not show signs, or at least not yet. They probably all are infected to some degree. But a short distance away we can find another patch that seems to be free of the hypomyces. So here's one of those blackening russulas, possibly Russula densifolia. There's another one. And these are perhaps Miller mushrooms. I need to kind of brush up on those, Russula parvovirescens, and a few more Boletus variopes. The bugs have hit that one pretty hard. And there are no quick and easy rules of thumb that can identify when a mushroom is safe or not. Forget about silver spoons and what a squirrel can eat, or a bug or a bird. The only way to be safe is to learn each of these species and their poisonous lookalikes in exhaustive detail. Alright, our briquettes are beginning to take. We'll spread them out a bit and make a little nest for our Dutch oven. That Dutch oven is ancient. It belonged to my grandparents. They don't make them like that anymore. I'm going in with just enough water to cook the amount of pasta I'm going to cook. Now I've lightly rinsed the mushrooms, and any excess dirt or bits of leaves that are still clinging to them, I'm just brushing away. But that's because I'm cooking outdoors. If I were in my kitchen, I would probably actually clean them more thoroughly. Uh, the old saying that you should only brush the mushrooms and so forth doesn't really apply. There's a stage in the cooking that we will drive off the water and so forth. Now, if there's a lot of bug damage, I'm throwing that part away. If there's only a little bit of bug damage, I'm leaving that in. The fact of the matter is, if you're eating wild mushrooms in Iowa, you are going to eat some fungus gnat larvae. It's just extra protein. So our water is up to a rapid boil. Time to go in with the pasta, rigatoni in this case, but any large pasta like that will work. And once they're close to al dente, we will set those off to the side and begin cooking our mushrooms. On with the wok, and just a little bit of olive oil, not a whole lot of mushrooms. These are kind of sponge-like mushrooms. If you put in a whole lot of oil, they're just going to absorb it and become kind of greasy. So, in with our mushrooms and onions, and we're going to cook them to the point where the water is driven off and the mushrooms begin to brown a little bit. In the meanwhile, we'll forage some bee balm, some Monarda fistulosa. It looks clean, hasn't been sprayed with anything, and so forth. We use that as a garnish at the end. And now back to our mushrooms. You'll notice that a lot of water has come out of them. And so we're going to continue cooking until this water is driven off and the mushrooms begin to get a little bit of browning. Not only to kill and thoroughly cook any of those fungus gnat larvae that remain inside the mushrooms, but also to have that Maillard reaction that will give us the more complex flavors. We'll break down those proteins into sugars. And so now we've added just a little bit more oil. That will make our sauce nice and rich. You could add butter in that case, but just a bit more oil is all we need here. And we've added, there's just a few ladlefuls of pasta water left in the pasta. The rest has been absorbed. So we've added the pasta and the pasta water, which is good and starchy. That will emulsify the oil and this cheese that I'm adding into a sauce. So we've added that, we're stirring that in, incorporating it in to that pasta water, and the starch of which will build us a nice sauce. Here you can see the sauce is beginning to coat the spoon that I'm using to stir it with. We want to, you don't want it to drive it down to the point where it splits, but you don't want it to be watery on the other hand. I probably could have gone a little bit longer. The sauce is slightly loose, but it's going to be fine. It hasn't split yet or anything. And of course, I'm using the real Parmigiano Reggiano. That's the only sort of cheese I can digest. It's aged for so long the enzymes have a chance to convert all the lactose to lactic acid. And so that with the wild mushrooms, I don't need to tell you, is quite tasty. And of course, much of the forest had been cleared at some point, leaving only the large oak trees standing. But there were some reminders or remnants of what was once there. This, I knew what it was, but I had to just stare at it for about 10 minutes before it came to me. It's Kentucky coffee tree. In the legume family, Fabaceae, has this large compound leaf with the alternate arrangement. I also found some Xanthoxylum americanum scattered in with the Lonicera macchii. And I did not find a mature stand of it, so it could be being confused for an invasive plant. This is one of those Scrophularia. They're a tall plant in the Lamiales order, so they have that square stem the opposite leaves and so forth, but the flowers are just completely different. Figwort, Figwrt, is the common name for the plant. Nothing to do with real figs.